Okay, even I'm getting impatient with myself, so I will start doing the introductions. A very good evening to you, or good afternoon, or good morning, or good middle of the night, depending on where you're joining us from. Thank you very much for coming along to our session. This is the Ardari session. We're looking very much at following the theme of the conference, really, today. Considering data continuity strategies, considering how research institutions can steer a path through difficult times, and ideally keep the services and the data going, um, that's produced and managed and so forth during the good times. So my name is James Wilson. I'm one of four co-chairs of the Research Data Architectures for Research Institutions group. I shall introduce the others in a second. And thank you very much for joining us this evening. Next slide, please. So we have a slightly altered agenda, I'm afraid. We have had um, a couple of people who've been unable to make it, so we've lost Jacko, unfortunately. And just a few hours ago, I got a message from Wolfram that he's unwell and unable to join us, which is unfortunate. But I shall try and persuade him to give us a copy of his slides, so all of those of you who are attending can, in due course, have a look and imagine what he would have been saying from the slides he provides. We will still have one presenter presenting their own case study today, and that's John Crabtree from Chapel Hill, who will be introducing in a minute. This does mean we have slightly more time than anticipated for all the people who are joining us, the community, you guys, to talk about your own instances, how you're finding things, and have a discussion. So one of the things we generally do in the Ardari sessions is that our speakers give a little bit of a perspective on things, but actually that discussion and considering how different people are dealing with challenges, it very much forms the heart of most of these meetings. Once we've had a discussion on the theme, we will also be hearing from Canada about a large-scale RDM survey that they've been running recently, and we'll have a second Q&A after that before wrapping up, which may be slightly earlier than billed, given that we don't have all the speakers we initially anticipated. Next slide, please. So if you are new to Ardari, the Ardari Interest Group is primarily concerned with technical architectures for managing research data within universities and other multidisciplinary research institutions. You don't have to be from any university or other multidisciplinary research institution to join the group, to join the conversation. But it's very much about that kind of institutional perspective. And if we can learn lessons, get ideas from people who are in different circumstances, that's brilliant. We look to provide insight into the approaches being taken to the development and operation of architectures. And we tend to consider the term quite broadly. So not just the sort of technical interoperability between data and services, but also the kind of decision making, the policies that lie behind these things and how we can actually run and maintain services. So we have four co-chairs at the moment. I'm James Wilson from University College London. Keith Russell, I believe, is currently paddling to Tasmania, so won't be joining us this evening. Keith, if you are present, say something now. Rory is here. He's based in Edinburgh and working, well, he's the CEO of Research Space. And we have Matthew Chandler from Princeton. Um, as you can probably tell, looking at that list, we are a little bit male, we are a little bit Anglophone. If you are interested in joining the interest group, particularly if you can rebalance some of that, then we'd be delighted to hear from you after the session. Next slide, please. So we've been going for a number of years. This is not a new group. We roam from topic to topic, providing these kind of discussions and forums. We have the ability to go and spin out working groups. So if you're not too familiar with the whole concept of RDA, you get these discussion groups who deal with topics at a relatively high level. But part of the idea is that when we hit upon a topic that has interest, that has community drive behind it, we will try and spin out a working group. I'm not going to read out all the things here. You can have a look at them and see what we've done in past sessions. One thing I will draw attention to is the benchmarking survey. So back in 2019, we carried out a survey of data management tools, services, and so forth that universities provide. We've sort of been half meaning to get back and do an updated version of this ever since. So if people are interested in that in particular, it might be worth raising that at the end of today's session. As I've mentioned, we'll be hearing from Canada, where I think they've been doing something similar. So that might be something to take forward, or indeed just coming up with a group to think about how to maintain services during tough times. Next slide, please. And I think on this slide, I shall pass over to Matt.
Yes, thanks, James. So I'm Matt Chandler. Thanks everybody for joining us this morning or afternoon or evening or late evening, whatever the case may be for you. So what we want to do with our session today is have a discussion in these disruptive times where, depending on where in the world you're coming from or what institution you're a part of, the disruption may be felt in different ways. In North America, where I am, a lot of the disruption is around funding cuts or funding uncertainty, which causes us to strain a bit in thinking about our long-term plans for data services. We were talking about what we might do about that. Our first bright idea is to get people together to share knowledge, share experiences, share information. We're not primarily interested in avenues for getting more funding. That is, if funding is the issue, then that would be an obvious remedy. But we want to think about ways that we could be creative, engage in some contingency planning, and to maintain the continuity of our data services, even within tight budgets, so that we could meet our ongoing needs, so we can minimize the risk of data loss, and just generally be more resourceful. So as James mentioned, we had a few case studies originally planned. We're a little bit short on case studies. So we do have one. We're very grateful to John, who will walk us through the case at UNC Chapel Hill in a moment. But we'll be inviting everyone else who's present to share your experiences, share your ideas. There will be plenty of space for questions, questions amongst each other, questions of our presenters. We have a good amount of time for discussion here. And as James also mentioned, we have a second presentation about institutional capacities for research data management coming from a survey from Canada. So we'll treat that as a second bank with some Q&A, but we would look forward to wrapping it into the wider conversation towards the end of the time. So that's our plan. And now we're going to move into our first presentation block. So we have one, and then we'll take questions for John specifically, and then we'll move into discussion after that. And I'll continue driving the slides for you, John.
Thanks, Matt. So first to introduce myself, I'm Jonathan Crabtree. I direct the Research Data Management Core here at UNC Chapel Hill. I've been around Chapel Hill a long time, been here 33 years. I started over in the School of Medicine and then migrated over to the social science side and worked for the Odum Institute. Many of you may know me from the Odum Institute, was there for many, many years. But I have served on the Core Trust Seal board and was a director of the Core Trust Seal for a while, the chair of that board. I've also worked in the Dataverse community for many years, going on almost 20 years, a long time that we've been working with that community up at that began up at Harvard and really has been a great community to work with. And we're having our community meeting here pretty soon in May in Barcelona. So welcome anyone who'd like to attend that as well. But I've had a lot of history through UNC managing research outputs and managing a repository there at UNC, one of the oldest in the U.S. there. Of course, it doesn't compare to those around the world, especially those folks over in Europe. But we have a large corpus of data that we had to maintain, and the folks at UNC really started looking at some of all of the different options that we had when we started really getting a lot more stress and requirements, as well as some penalties that potentially would happen through some of our funders. So next slide. One of the things that we wanted to do is really tie our research data management, not just in and of itself, but also tie it to this roadmap. And we created this roadmap that really promotes the integrity, objectivity, and the quality of our research outputs. This really ties to what some are calling the gold standards of science, which really wants to make sure that things are reproducible, things are transparent, that we do communicate error and uncertainty and all the things that make research real research and trustworthy. So we really push towards this, and part of that is providing this infrastructure for research data management. Next slide. So when we started thinking about a research data management core at UNC, about, I guess, 3 years ago, the Vice Chancellor for Research came to myself and others at Odum and said, look, can you give us a blueprint? So we created a working group, as most universities do, and brought in our faculty, the folks from the library, the folks from all over campus. And one thing that became really clear is that this could not be a one group serve everything. This had to be a coordinated effort across all the research groups at UNC. And that's the core facilities, the folks that are in the sponsored programs with policy, folks that are working in our research institutes and centers and that work with our IT groups, obviously, University Council, as well as working with the individual departments where the faculty members lie and where many of these data are used and generated. So I'm hoping that we can coordinate across all of this, and we did that by creating the Research Data Management Core within the OVCR's office, and the OVCR is central to this. And we created basically 4 wings. We created a research data stewardship wing, an architecture wing. We created a group of digital data liaisons and domain specialists, as well as our administration and governance. And all this combines together, it combines together to make these data fair and usable. And that leans back to our reproducibility theme that we're talking about. So next slide. So our strategic goal, the number one goal here, is to protect those valuable research data assets. We all know that second only to our faculty and our staff are our data. They're a super valuable asset. We need to protect them. We need to maximize them. As we start looking into groups that want to leverage AI and want to use these new methodological approaches, we got to think of our data as an asset, right? This that asset that we really need to leverage is very valuable, and many, especially corporate groups, really want that data, and they would do anything to get that data. So we need to think of that as a data asset. So next slide. So we do this at UNC by thinking about this through the entire research lifecycle. This is not a wait until the end or create a policy that says you must deposit your data or share your data. But we work with our groups with data management sharing training. We work with the data management reviews of all the data management plans. We consult folks early on how to actually design their studies. We work with the Office of Sponsored Programs to help people generate good proposals, and those proposals are reviewed, and we work through all of them. And I say all of them, obviously we have thousands here at UNC. We can't do them all at one time, but we work with the groups to highlight the ones that have the biggest need at the proposal stage. but at the actual award stage, we do them all. We check every single one of those. We work through the collection and capture of data. We run and manage, the RDMC group manages our clinical trials data. We manage the Encore instance that we manage, REDCap, Viva, all of those tools that are used to capture data. We manage our regulatory systems and manage those. We help folks process data, but we really are coordinating many of this. Much of this happens in other places at UNC, but what we do is help coordinate that and work through that process. One of the things that we do and work with Rory, for example, to help capture data off machines, capture it off of M&R machines or mass spec machines or other types of flow cytometry machines, any other kind of machine that generates data. We want to capture that metadata, move it into lab notebooks, and then when it comes time to publish that data, you can just push a button and publish it. So we're working on some new test workflows to do some of those types of things and work with vendors and other groups to be able to do that. But the goal is to be sure that we put the data where it belongs. It doesn't necessarily have to go at UNC. Quite often the data belong in the QDR, the Qualitative Data Repository, which is a partner of ours, or maybe one of the federal agencies. But our UNC Dataverse does provide a central catalog for all that research data, so we know where that data go and we manage it at a central source. Next slide. We do that by providing a basic service, and our basic service is mandatory, and there is a small fee. It's very small compared to what they actually get. We actually subsidize this quite a bit, but most research grants that are not exempt or have a way to lower the cost is $900 a year, $900 a year per grant. So it's not a huge amount of money, but it does add up across thousands of grants, and that allows us to have data stewards consultation, to manage the repository, to provide project check-ins at the beginning of the project, through the middle of the project. Every year they talk with their researchers to be sure that they have all the resources they need. They coordinate across campus to be sure that they're leveraging the tools on our campus the best they can. So this basic service is the kind of the bedrock of RDMC, and then we start building on top of that. So next slide. So one of the other areas we do, as I mentioned earlier, is the clinical research area. So that is another layer on top of this basic service that we provide. And there are some fees for some of this, especially for the validated instances. The Food and Drug Administration here in the U.S. requires systems to be validated and reviewed. So sometimes those regulatory things add up some costs. So we do charge projects for those, but we manage these systems and plan for all of the data that comes through these systems to be archived somewhere. And we help those researchers do that as well. Next slide. And then all of this stuff pushes back into our concept of reproducibility. So we provide validation for those types of things. If researchers would like us to do a second check or a third-party review of their data, we do that. We will take their data and their code. We're working on some really innovative AI tools that we can look through the data and look through their research to flag things that aren't reproducible, or there are challenges for that. And we're working through some of that now. I saw a demo of it just this past week. But we have done this for years manually, but now we're working towards an automated system so we can roll this out to more and more customers, because as we know, that's very labor intensive. Next slide. Might have to hit it one more time. I bet there's another thing that's going to pop up here. Yeah. So we all know that this basic service and all of these things are that I mentioned before, while super important, they won't do it all. There's no way that we can, for a small fee, as I mentioned before, handle large scale data, sensitive data, or complex data curation that requires de-identification, or all of those other services. Either we will connect our research teams with other people at UNC that do this, they can do these things themselves and have direct charges in their grants to do that, or they could pay us and we contract to do some of these things. So we will find them solutions, whether it be in-house at RDMC or across our campus by sharing some of these potentials out to other research centers. Quite often research centers have labor sitting there that if they have a grant that's ending and they have some extra statisticians or they have some extra curators there, that we can leverage that work and add those folks on these grants. So we provide basically a central service where we can coordinate across campus, and we're working to make that as smooth as possible. Next slide. So now, as I mentioned earlier, we do have a central research data catalog at UNC. We use the Dataverse network for this and have collections for all our different research projects. Every basic service project gets a place to put these data. Their data management plans are stored there. All of their administrative documents are there. We don't require them to put their data there unless they don't have another home for it. And then they're allowed to store up to 2 terabytes as part of that basic fee. But if the data do get placed elsewhere, we do require by policy them to put a link and a DOI link out to where it is. So we actually have a way to track down where all our data are. So we are tracking those data objects so we can leverage that output as well. Next slide. And I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but we are managing this stuff out of the med school, and we do some work for the UNC hospitals as well, where they do a lot of clinical trials. And a lot of this, especially when you talk about the drugs or the medical devices, they have a lot of regulatory burden and require software validation and manage very complex situations with our policy, our privacy office, with our compliance office. So we work with them, and we're the central point for all the electronic solutions for that. We don't do the clinical work itself, but we manage all of the research information systems that manage all of that as well. Next slide. We have many programs to try to connect all of these things. We work through all of our teams to be sure we have training materials. Some of them are required for our validated systems, that you don't have access to these systems until you get trained. So they're mandatory trainings for some of them. Some of them are voluntary. We work with our School of Information Library Science, School of Data Science, and Computer Science School to bring students into the mix. For us, it's a very cost-effective way to get labor and to train the next generation of researchers. We leverage them quite often. We also have liaisons, whether they be within the chemistry department or whether they're in School of Public Health or over in the med school. We leverage those folks. Some of them are postdocs, PhD postdocs. There's also some that are that we pay, that we actually fund some of their time because they can help us out. Next slide. We have several different things that are just really beginning to explode, actually. Our AI driven research, the data readiness, the data policies around AI. We have a big conference coming up in April where we're meeting with the leaders here in North Carolina with the governor's office to really push what needs to happen so our data are AI ready. And we have the right inputs for all these AI engines that people want to use. We've been working with a lot of industry trying to collaborate with, for example, the folks at the hospital and the private groups that are wanting to do research with us, and a lot of the chemist groups and a lot of the drug companies that are really coordinating efforts to help fund some research and coordinate us with that infrastructure to move things back and forth. The whole goal here is to unify our campus infrastructure. And we all know that many universities, just like ours, are very siloed, lots of resources all over the place in these silos. And while that is great for those in those local silos, it really creates these have and have nots. It also is very wasteful as we look at the dollars being restricted, as Matt was talking earlier, and pressures on F&A. We need to be sure we spend our research dollars as effectively as we can. So RDMC serves on our data governance board, and when we look at people that are making purchases for data management tools, for example, we look at that tool and see what does it provide. Is it something new? Is it something the campus should support as a collective group? Or is it a repetition of something that's already here? And we suggest people move to other solutions. So we work together to streamline those data workflows and really integrate all of our systems at UNC. Next slide. And I think this is our last slide, but feel free to bounce over to our researchdata.unc.edu site. We have begun not only providing this service for the folks at UNC, but also our partner schools within North Carolina, as well as some external schools. We do some work for Emory University, for example, through the GDCC work, the Global Dataverse Community Consortium work. We have groups within UNC helping folks all around the world actually doing Dataverse installations and managing research data, or teaching people how, or training people how to do data curation. We've done work in Singapore. We've done work in Kenya, as well as many places in Europe. So we're happy to talk to anybody about their research data management needs, and hopefully we'll pair you up with a local partner, or we can help if we have to. Other than that, I think that's it.
Thanks, John. Really appreciate that talk. So we have some time for questions for John specifically. You can feel free to write them in the chat, or you can unmute. You can use the raise your hand feature. I'll kick us off with one question that I had about the origins of this service, of the core, and what were some of the challenges that you faced, especially on those points you were making about breaking down silos and getting buy-in for an effort towards unification? And so what sort of challenges did you face there, and how did you address them?
Yeah, there's always lots of challenges. We all like to think that we're working at a university for the better good of the community, and that we're very altruistic. But the bottom line is, the way people get rewarded in the university system is they have their publications and they have their tenure reviews, and they're very protective of their data, their workflows, they're protective of their money. So yes, there's lots of challenges there. I think the way we approached it is more of a, how can we help you? Yes, we're starting off with a small basic fee, and that is required, and that was something that many of the folks pushed back on early on. But when they found out what they really get for that, and the bang for those very small dollars, and the economies of scale there, we ended up getting more and more people on board fairly quickly. I mean, it took several months, but fairly quickly they realized, oh, wait a minute, they can help us with these things that we've been struggling with. You still have the silos, you still have those things. And one of the ways we address that is, we wanted to be sure that everyone knew that we're not here to replace any existing group that's out there working. There's plenty of work in research data management to go around. We all know that, right? If someone said, okay, John, I want you to do all of the research data management for everywhere at UNC, it's going to overwhelm me quickly. And I knew that. We knew that from the very beginning. So this had to be a collaborative effort. It had to be a coordinating effort. It had to be one where we pull people together, and we basically let people know the value of what they were already doing. Many of these folks were doing research data management and didn't even know it. We need to be sure to highlight that, especially in the US, where we're having a real stresses on our F&A, or indirect dollars that we use to run these facilities, and to have the resources to buy big equipment that's shared across groups. We need to be sure that data management is not left out of that, and that we can create a direct line cost for that. Show people the value of it, and you have to do that, you have to put a dollar value on it. You have to show research data management costs money, and you put it in the grant as a direct line item, so people see that, what it actually costs and what you get. So it's not a hidden thing where no one knows the cost. Everyone knows exactly the cost. In the past, everyone just assumed somebody would take care of it. The library will take care of it, or I can always go to the vice chancellor for research and give me more money to do this, right? Just ask for the money, they'll give it to you. They got all these big pots of F&A money, they'll just hand it to you, right? Well, we all know that's not true. It's all allocated, and there's things that are demands upon that thing. So what we have to do is show the real need and document that real need, and then coordinate with everyone around campus to be sure when those research dollars come in for data management that they go to these research groups that are really doing the work. And sometimes that's not RDMC, sometimes that's someone else on our campus, and we just help coordinate that as well. So I think the key to this was that collaborative effort and coordinating across the infrastructure, and to convince people, hey, we're not here to replace you. We're here to help coordinate it and bring you customers. So we will bring you research dollars, not take your research dollars. I think that was the key to us kind of getting over that hump.
Thank you. Okay, so it's open to the group here. Any other questions? Feel free to unmute or to write them in the chat as well. James, I see your hand.
Yeah. Got to ask the question. I mean, you've got a really nice full suite of services and training and everything else that you're offering. Times are getting tougher. If you did have to sort of take a sort of a 5% cut to your funding, what are the areas, what would you do, whether it's an area where you would provide less support or an alternative way of generating more income to compensate for it? How would you respond to those kind of challenges?
Right. I think the best way to respond to those things is collaborate with other groups. One thing that is really good about how we planned for RDMC, and this actually started even before we started seeing the huge pressures on funding cuts, as well as before we started seeing the real attacks on F&A. But we diversified our funding. The funding doesn't come from one single source. It comes across all directorates. It comes across all research areas. It comes from all the different funders. So when, for example, funding was reduced over in the social sciences in certain areas, we also at the same time we saw funding increase on other areas. So those things, it's like diversifying your portfolios within your investment for your retirement. You want to diversify those things. Yes, you're going to get cuts, but over time, the research dollars will get spent somewhere in the research apparatus, right? If we started out early on thinking, okay, we need to make this thing resilient. We need to make it sustainable long term. So, and I see in the chat someone asked about how is it funded. So that leads to our strategy. Number one, it was to diversify not only which grants and which types of grants we receive some of that fee money, but also we have these basically a three-tiered model. We do use F&A, we use indirect, we have some indirect from the Vice Chancellor's office to do the administrative work. I think you'll always have some F&A because there's always some administrative duties in any group of our size. But we also have that basic fee money, which is about $900 a year on average per grant. And over time, as new grants are funded, that increases, right? So in the short run, we're leveraging at F&A dollars, but over time, that basic fee money will add up, right? It'll offset some of those F&A dollars. At the same time, we're using economies of scale to start doing what we call add-on services, those extra data management duties. And sometimes those are outside the university. They could be at Emory University, for example. We have a contract with them to manage a lot of their research data. We do contract work for the Texas Digital Libraries. We do contract work for the folks over in Singapore. So those types of things offset. So we have a three-tiered model. We have a basic F&A fund that supports things until we get things moving and basically over the hump to those basic services, providing those resources. And then we add the add-on services. Now, having said that, we might have those cuts like you're talking about. We will have to look at those, the ability to do that. And I think if we have to do the cuts, then what we have to do is lean on our partners, lean on other people to do some of this work, because we might get cut centrally, but for example, right now, AI is a really big burgeoning area. There are a lot of resources there. We're looking to diversify into that and offset some of those dollars just in case. Look ahead into the future that if we get cuts, that we will be able to subsidize that with making our data AI ready. So I think, I'm not sure that answers your question, but we created that diversity of funding to try to prevent any one single cut from hurting us. And then we decided to work as a team across campus to collaborate with other groups to prevent future funding errors.
Go ahead, Rory.
Yeah, so John, thank you. That was a great talk. Following up on James's question, but also just picking up on something I heard you say just before, I think just before James asked the question. I think you said towards the end of your comments that you were looking to something along the lines of help the researchers get in some ways get more funding, help them increase their funding. And so
Yes.
my question is this: in that regard, you described some of the kind of structural, the siloing that is the case at every institution, which is incredibly inefficient for the institution and for the researcher. And so you feel that at the institutional level. But my question is, have you seen any indications that the funders, because I know this is happening in Europe, that the funders, I'm talking like, the NIH, the real funders are looking at this siloing and inefficient use of infrastructure and saying, that's not good. It's not acceptable. And our funding is actually, a lot of it's being not goes down a hole, but it's not being used as efficiently.
Yeah.
So in terms of the funding, not of RDM type activities, but of the actual core research, are you noticing any signs that these funders are in beyond kind of the stuff of like, you got to share your data, which has no teeth, but I'm talking about more seriously in terms of funding actual core research? Are they beginning to think about this as more of a global problem as opposed to something that just happens at each institution, and reflect that in the way that they review the real money which is coming into the research grants?
Yeah, I would love to say yes, I see a movement there. I see some program officers and even some administrative folks within NIH and NSF that realize it's a challenge. They know there's a challenge there, but I don't think I haven't seen them, as someone will say, put their money where their mouth is, as actually fund some of that research, right? Because in the end, they have to defend how they spend their money. And it's just not, it's still, unfortunately, still seen as infrastructure, right? It's not the cutting edge, cool research. And I really do think there's that stigma around that. And that's preventing the big dollars from solving the bigger problem that we know are there. Now, having said that, we might be on the beginning of an era where we might have a toe in this world, and that is making data AI ready, because that is a huge advantage to folks to have really nice AI, good curated data that with enough metadata, enough provenance to understand that these data are really valid in in true research methodological approaches. And if you just point AI at bad data, AI is going to give you hallucinations, if I can say the word, and they're going to give you a lot of stuff that takes a lot of labor of people to go through. But if you point it to really good data, you point it to curated data, you customize those algorithms to leverage that, then you'll start seeing some really big rewards from managing your data in advance. And I think people are starting to realize that. They're starting to talk about that, and they're asking, what will it take to make my data AI ready? I think that's an area that we all should take advantage of, and we should think through that, because really, it at first it seems real scary and cutting edge, but honestly, at the very base of it, we all know that the research apparatus is good data in, good research out. So we have good data described well and curated appropriately. You have to start with that foundation. And those are the skill sets we already have. We've done that for years in the data archiving and curation groups. We just need to be sure that people understand that, hey, this is, in the past, it was made it cool and easy to find. Now it makes it actually usable to the masses of AI tools out there. So I think we're on the edge of it, Rory. I think that we have a chance, if we leverage what we already have learned in the past, to be sure to educate our funders that, look, you can fund all the AI research you would love to do, all these prompts and algorithms, the prompt engineering, and all these new generative AI techniques. But unless you spend some of that money to get the data ready, what you're going to end up with is not near the bang for the buck, so to speak. So I think the money might come. I'm hopeful.
So I think we should take one more question. We have one in the chat here from Lucia about how you deal with the resistance of researchers of making their data AI ready. And Lucia, if you have any follow-ups on that, feel free to jump in here. But on that topic, John, how do you deal with that resistance?
I was going to also say, sorry, that researchers also have this mindset that they own the data, but they also want to control how people are using this data, and they're afraid of it contravening what they found in their own research, if that's a good way of saying that.
Sure. So we try to empower the researcher, number one. The first thing is we empower those researchers to be able to control their data within these repositories, to be able to manage those data like they want to have them managed. If they would love to, if they want to put embargo periods on it, we work with them to choose the correct embargo periods. If they want to restrict them due to the privacy issues, we work on a privacy office to work with them on that. So that's part of our basic service, is to work with those researchers so they understand that they still have control of their data. Now, this idea of owning the data, that is a very controversial, especially with some of our researchers, because when here in the U.S., for example, when we have a federally funded project, the contractor is actually our Office of Sponsored Programs. The researchers do not own that data. That data is owned by the folks at UNC, but that we don't let that ownership be too heavy. We allow them to help manage those research data so they feel like they own it. Now, in the end, when they leave our university, we own that data. We have to preserve it because we have been made promises, our OSB made promises to the funder that even if that researcher leaves our institution, we're still going to abide by those contracts and grants that we signed. So I think that's the step one. Step two, when it comes to AI, is also help them leverage AI in their own research, combining their data with other data, make their data stronger. And that's the message we need to get to our researchers, is we're not stealing your data and giving you nothing back. We're leveraging your data combined with other people's data to make everyone's data stronger. So we can help you get more grants by leveraging that. Now, we're not there yet, but that's the conversation I think we need to have. And there are a lot of naysayers. There are a lot of people that are worried about it. And I totally get it. We see them all the time. But I think if we talk to them with the respect that they're the engine creating these data, and they're fueling the future AI data ready engines in the future. So we need to keep these researchers in the loop and be sure to assist them in sharing that data and managing that data. And it's definitely a tough thing to deal with sometimes.
All right, thank you so much. I'm going to transition us into our scheduled group discussion time. So we have some prompts that we've prepared, but we are a small enough group. We welcome others to jump in and share from some of their experiences. On the topic of data that might be used in AI models and researchers' reluctance, I can share from our side at Princeton in our own repository, we've had an increasing number of requests from our researchers or questions about this. And what we've done is we've bridged that into a discussion about licenses, which is otherwise difficult to get researchers to pay that much attention to. It seems abstract, distant from what they're trying to do in many cases. And so we take the questions as interest in the services that we're offering, and we try to open up doors for more discussion to help them increase the value of their data outputs. So we can take this conversation in a number of different directions. I'll start us off just reading the first one here. What other approaches has your institution taken to minimize the risk of data loss, or other ways of addressing tight budgets or constraints on funding? Bernadette, I see your hand.
Hi, thank you very much for this discussion. So I'm fortunate to work in Australia, and we have a federally funded or Commonwealth funded organization called the Australian Research Data Commons. And we're very, very, very fortunate that it is made up of representatives of researchers and data infrastructure savvy people around Australia's leading research institutions. I don't know in total how many different universities are represented, but at least probably a dozen, if not more, of the overall roughly 35 universities Australia has. And what they do is they serve as a coordination body. So they get a big lump sum, they co-fund projects. They never say they fund it, but they get Australian Research Council funding, and then they call for and work with research teams, and then we work collaboratively. So over at Queensland University of Technology in the Centre for Data Science, I'm working and project managing one that we've gotten about $1 million, and we share it with University of Technology Sydney and Curtin University. There's probably in total about a dozen researchers, and we're working on advanced analytics and AI resource hub, where principles around fair reuse of content, maybe creating some new resources around training for federated learning approaches, deploying everything in a VRE through our national infrastructure is how we've gone. So having worked in the US and supported the US scholarly research community, I just feel like Australia has done this one thing really, really well. And I feel really fortunate to be part of it. And I'll also just comment how great this conversation is, because it was precisely 10 years ago when I project managed the US EPA's second cloud-based app, first open data. It was literally opendata.epa.gov, and Trump came in and defunded it. That was the impetus to do a PhD on how do we preserve nationally significant federally funded data sets. So good to hear this conversation, but sad that it took it's not sad at all. It's great that the response by the public research community has been to bring us where we are today with RDA, which obviously was operating long before that all happened. But thank you for all the good work that you do collectively.
Yeah, sure. And thanks for sharing that. I wonder, do you have any comments about the benefits, and not just in pooling funding and shared resources and collaborating, but are you seeing any advantages in terms of an economy of scale that you might get at that level?
100%, because what you're getting is collectively the best of all the university research brains trust working on a problem we all have, right? Nobody is facing a data management problem that another peer at another institution hasn't already faced. And one of the things I see in particular, 15 years ago, we had the luxury of, well, not luxury, the necessity to spend 65% of the time identifying and harmonizing data sets of a grant. So you work really hard, you finally get your $3 million, and you spend 65% of that budget oftentimes harmonizing data sets. Today, younger researchers just want to jump in. They don't really care about all the details. They unfortunately don't care about data ethics oftentimes, which is kind of my reason for being at my institution, which is to teach them around data ethics, which has gotten prominence in the era of generative AI. But I think that this Australian Research Data Commons, ARDC, is absolutely brilliant, and they put a lot of emphasis and raise up data concerns around the humanities, arts and social sciences, and Indigenous data. They have a whole research track around that, and leverage the considerable and excellent research around Māori and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander First Nations data concerns, which I think, as a colleague of mine says, what's good for mob, meaning First Nations people, is good for everyone. So they lead the way on a lot of asking a lot of things about technology, digital platforms that we should all be more concerned about. But they've been at the pointy end of the spear for lots of reasons. I won't get on my bandstand about that. But yeah, anyway, ARC is definitely a model to look at. And I think it's much more efficient. And they have budgets of around 18 million Australian for years. And they get a lot of bang for their buck for 18 or $20 million Australian.
That's great. Thank you. Anyone else, would you like to share something about your institutional perspective, your experience? Anybody who's dealing with tight issues of budget cuts right now, what are your contingency plans? Rory, I see your hand up. Why don't you take that one?
Yeah, just kind of following on the previous comment, I'm going to address specifically second, third, fourth, and fifth bullet points, which to me are all related. So unfortunately, one of the speakers which we had invited wasn't able to. I'm not Wolfram, but another speaker we invited wasn't able to come. But I'm going to, without revealing their name or their institution, tell their story because I think it's really interesting. So this is the case of a Dutch university, which, for all the reasons in those bullet points, proactively approach, and this is really our institutional perspective here, proactively approached SURF, which is the Dutch equivalent of ARDC, and said, we don't think going forward we have the human resources or the financial resources to continue to deliver all of the many services that research services that we currently deliver to our researchers. And we would like to test the waters by having one of those services offered by SURF, the national provider, back to our researchers rather than doing it ourselves. And if this is successful, then we'd like to consider doing the same thing with other services. And to the second point, in addition to the potential financial savings to the institution, they see the fact that SURF is already providing multiple services to all the Dutch universities. So they very much see benefits in terms of economies of scale by having SURF do it collectively as opposed to each university doing it. And also, to some of the points that John was making, they see SURF potentially being able to provide these services in an integrated way as opposed to a siloed way, so that potentially could help to chip away at that issue as well. And I happen to be here in Norway at the moment. And sure enough, I had some discussions with a Norwegian university today. And the Norwegians are not as advanced, I don't think, as the Dutch in terms of implementing something like this. But sure enough, this university and other universities in Norway are thinking along similar lines. They don't have the benefit of SURF, which is quite unique, but nevertheless, it's more of a bottom-up approach to thinking how they could collectively work together, and then maybe work with their national service provider. And I know that Sweden is looking at similar things. So I think in Europe, and then if you look at the EOS nodes that are being developed, this is the future for Europe, and it is happening. Whereas obviously in the US, there's no equivalent to SURF or ARDC, so it's a very different environment. But I think, yeah. So and had our invited speaker can't come, he would have articulated, I think, some of the same things that I've just mentioned.
James, I see your hand as well.
Yeah, I was just thinking, being one of the co-chairs, I perhaps should have thought about this in the build-up to this, exactly what we would do in my institution in UCL, were we, and thankfully at the moment we haven't got any particular pressure on funding, but there are a couple of things that sprang to mind. Again, neither of which actually involves cutting services, but making the case for why we should be essentially given more because we can save money by doing it. And two things that occurred. First, just thinking of that whole issue about silos. We've still got various silos that we can break down. So, for instance, we're now getting much better at persuading our researchers to cost in some of the costs of data management, particularly when it comes to data storage for projects that require very large volumes of data. But we're actually not all that well linked into our costing system. So we use a system called WorkTribe that people do when they're preparing their bids. But despite some initial efforts to try and work more closely with the team that manages that, we're not very closely aligned at the moment. And actually, it's quite hard for us to find out how much we've been written in and then be alerted when people actually get funding, when it is awarded by the team who's involved in doing that, to actually be able to collect the money off them as well. So I think making a case for better integration between different teams, between these different silos, is one way in which we can strengthen our position. We've also been helped, and it's a slightly unfortunate sort of help, but by data loss incidents, and really communicating with people who are at the kind of the center of senior management about how we can assist with avoiding data loss incidents by having proper centralized data management as well. And we probably haven't done enough as yet to really sort of make the case for this and protect against potential cuts by simply pointing out how we can benefit the central university more than perhaps we do at the moment. And part of the reasons we haven't made the case is because everyone's so busy, of course. But it's definitely sort of sparking some ideas about how we can try and insulate ourselves against potential cuts.
Great, thank you. Any other experiences to share or questions to pose to the group?
I have a question.
Bernadette.
Yeah, I have a question for John, and that's I think that I really appreciated the talk from the socio-technical.
Oh, Bernadette, you're muted.
Sorry. I really appreciated Jonathan's talk from his lifting up and raising the socio-technical aspects of the problem. They're not technical. We know how to do the data sharing, but it's all really managing the people and expectations and as we well understand. Now, I'm in a university setting, and there's obviously the big gold rush is AI. So everyone who was maybe a social media researcher or any other kind of researcher is jumping on the bandwagon around being an AI researcher. How has anyone kind of decoupled that from the whole thing that Jonathan was talking about, making data AI ready and kind of making that serious? And no, we really need to do this, and we're not just talking about sort of, we're not conflating AI and generative AI. We're appreciating the long legacy and value of machine learning, which predated generative AI by at least probably 20 years. I mean, how do you cut through that? Because I just see everybody in education, social media, all different disciplines, all in fact getting grants, hundreds of thousands of dollars of grants. And I'm like, this person was a science communication scholar 2 years ago, and now they're sucking up grants for $300,000 to $500,000 on AI. How do we navigate that so that we do get back to the mission of making data AI ready?
I totally agree with you, Bernadette. We've got a real issue with that, to be honest with you. Right now, we're trying to do as much training as we can. It's where we are. We're partnering with different agencies, groups, research centers around UNC to train their faculty on how to use some of these. We do have some AI policies, but to be honest, it's almost the Wild West, because what's happening is researchers are going out, they're going to YouTube or online somewhere, and they're saying, "Oh, this is how you can generate a new qualitative survey with AI," and these folks are giving them instruction on things that are just not true, that are not that we don't allow within our university, for example, because you just, so it's an educational thing, and it's like you're saying, it's the gold rush. There's a lot of money out there, so people are rushing towards it. So it's a real challenge. What we've been trying to do is gatekeep on the big data sets. Our health data that's coming out of the hospital. We talk to people. We just don't allow big AI tools into that unless they're in our environment where we save all those data, and we don't let those out. So the big hitters, we're trying to use policy to keep people from leaking the data out to Microsoft or anyone else that capture that data. But one of the things, for example, ChatGPT now has a little button that you can click that says, "Don't use my data to train your model," right? Well, do we all trust that little click box, right? What do we want to point it at? Do you want to point it at all your PHI and PII at your hospital, and hopefully it won't do it, right? Well, we can't do that. So we have to think through some of those and educate our folks on that. And right now we're in a teaching mode, so our training areas are critical. Hopefully one of these days we'll get to that next level where we can not only tell them the right thing to do, but we can show them. We can have the data ready and say, okay, see the benefits of this. But you're right, it's a challenge, and I wish I had a solution. All I have is, yes, that's a problem.
Yeah, well, I think sector-specific training, and to the point about healthcare, because that's the space that I work in, we're looking for both existing training resources and also developing use cases around, here's what could go wrong. Because I think people will respond to that. Right now, the story has been so effusive, it's so positive, it saves you time, but then nobody's kind of, it's a bit like, this was actually a good example I just heard. We're going through e-mobility and e-scooter regulation in Australia, and stories about how parents, if they let their kids have an e-scooter and the kid causes, and they're on an unregulated scooter and cause $100,000 of damage, it's the parent who's responsible for it. And I think if more parents realize before they let their kids get a $2,000 mobility scooter or e-scooter that's unregulated, there are real harms associated with it. Or, I don't want to go down the path of, if you take this illegal drug, it could kill you when you even try it one time. But it's phenomenal how both agentic AI, voice-activated AI, medical clinicians, a lot of the healthcare people we work with, they're also clinicians as well as researchers. They're using all these tools to record interactions with patients, and they're supposed to, in theory, consent, but what does it mean when you're sitting in the office and the doc says to you, hey, do you mind if I, for the purposes of transcribing my notes and keeping track of what we discussed, I turn my voice agent on? People don't know what that means, and anyway, so I think I'm thinking about this. We haven't done it yet. What's the downside to you using certain agentic AI or Gen AI, et cetera, various tools, let alone putting copyrighted data into the platforms that big US and Chinese tech vendors operate?
So thanks everyone for this lively discussion. We do have another part that I want to make sure we have plenty of time for. So I'm going to wrap up this conversation and let's see, Rory, was there any introduction you wanted to give here?
No, I wasn't expecting to do that.
Okay.
So feel free to go ahead yourself if you want to. Sorry, I'm not prepared to give the introduction.
Yeah, no worries. So Tracy, I believe you would like to share from your own screen. So assuming that works, go for it. And if not, then I have the backup slides.
How's that look?
Looks good. Take it away.
Okay, and you can obviously hear me. All right, thank you. Okay, I think I'm maybe pulling the conversation back a little bit here, given the depths we were going to there. But my name is Tracy Salloway. I'm speaking to you from Ontario, Canada, and I'm here to share preliminary results from the 2025 Canadian Institutional RDM Capacity Survey. And I'm here on behalf of our research team. A few of them are in the audience with us today. So we've seen a lot of change in the Canadian RDM landscape during the past decade. In Canada, our federal research funding agencies are collectively called the tri-agencies, and they released a draft RDM policy for consultation in 2018 and then followed that up with a formal policy release in 2021. And that formal policy includes 3 requirements. So the first is that institutions were to develop and share an RDM strategy that details best practices in RDM and supports that are in place for researchers. And that was to be shared by the spring of 2023. The second requirement was that grant applications require data management plans for adjudication. And third, that grant recipients are to deposit into a digital repository all data, metadata, and code that directly support research conclusions at the time of publication. And just to flag that this is not a requirement to share data, it is a requirement to deposit data. So the agencies have been taking a phased approach to implementation in Canada. For example, making that initial list of grants that require data management plans and then gradually growing that list over time. And now most recently phasing in the data deposit requirement over the next several years. So the first institutional RDM capacity survey was carried out in 2019. I wasn't yet a member of the group, but some of our team were actually part of that first survey as well. And so that was between release of the draft and the finalized RDM policy. This survey was intended to fill gaps in our understanding of the current state in institutions, develop benchmarks for progress, and provide some direction in terms of where to focus resources for support. And so the second survey that I'm sharing preliminary results for today was conducted just in fall of 2025. So we're really just digging into analysis. And that's 4 years after the tri-agencies RDM policy was released and 2 years after Canadian institutions published their strategies. And so together, these 2 surveys will give us an opportunity to capture and reflect on the short-term impact of the national policy and the early implementation of institutional strategies. And so just a quick word about the Alliance, which actually sounds similar to some of the other organizations that came up in conversation. So we conducted this survey as members of the Digital Research Alliance's network of experts, and the research intelligence expert group that we're part of is tasked with gathering evidence to guide development and best practices in RDM. And so one of our team works directly for the Alliance, and the rest of us are sort of librarians and data professionals from universities in Canada. But the Digital Research Alliance itself, or the Alliance as we call it, was established in 2019, and it's a national not-for-profit membership-based organization with a mandate to coordinate, operate, and fund activities to advance and sustain Canada's digital research infrastructure. And so the Alliance really provides leadership and improves access to infrastructure and services in advanced research computing, research data management, and research software. As I said, it sounds like similar work to what the Australian Data Research Commons is doing. So diving into the actual survey, so this map just gives you a sense of the size and scope of what we're trying to do here. Given Canada's size and the variation in the number and types of institutions across our provinces and territories, survey responses have been aggregated into regions. And this is to preserve the anonymity of institutions and their respondents, because as large as we are, our RDM community can feel quite small sometimes. Our survey reports that are targeted for publication this fall will include more detailed breakdowns. And in terms of the responses, we received 55 unique submissions in total. So we accepted a single response from each institution, and we encouraged participation from multiple departments in that response. Most were received from universities, but we also have engagement from other types of institutions, so colleges and CEGEPs, research hospitals, government research institutes, et cetera. And libraries were most involved in compiling the responses on behalf of their institutions, also frequent participation from research administration bodies on campus, such as the research office. So diving into the actual results, the survey results from 2019 showed that institutions were already viewing RDM as a collaborative endeavor. Now there's lots of different levels of maturity here. We're interested in how those collaborative approaches may have evolved since the release of the policy. And so of interest is the shift we see in senior leadership from participating to leading institutional RDM efforts. There's a big jump here. We're also seeing increases across the board in involvement from IT departments, from legal offices, and researchers themselves. It appears that the policy requirements may have spurred more involvement from these and other offices in RDM. However, I'll note that multiple survey respondents mention the need for better alignment and communication among departments as time goes on. So I think there's issues in terms of actually sustaining the coordination and the connection that was prompted with the release of the policy. More than 72% of respondents shared that one of the key barriers to supporting RDM is a lack of awareness about the institutional services that are already available. An important aspect of the RDM landscape in Canada is the fact that we do have well-developed regional and national consortia to provide shared resources at scale. So institutions benefit from access to shared infrastructure and services that enable them to enhance internal RDM supports and better meet the needs of researchers. So we can see over half of responding institutions have been involved with regional and national collaborative RDM initiatives for 3 or more years. And the Alliance services and access to shared infrastructure are mentioned frequently as drivers for this involvement. I know that coming from a small institution myself, we would not be able to offer the level of data curation and deposit support services that we do without this access. And so moving into actual infrastructure, as mentioned, the tri-agencies have been phasing RDM policy requirements into the funding cycle over the past several years. So most recently, they announced implementation of the data deposit requirement. This has obviously significant implications for institutions as they prepared for increased demand to support data deposit processes. And so we asked institutions about the current availability of infrastructure for data storage at different phases of the life cycle. In terms of availability of infrastructure when data is actively accessed and modified, we can see strong internal support here, whether that's through centralized storage provided by IT services or researchers and departments implementing their own solutions. The longer term storage needs, that's where Canada's collective approach seems to be having the most impact at this time. So Borealis is the Canadian instance of Dataverse, and it's run by a consortium library service called Scholars Portal out of the University of Toronto. And this supports members to implement and manage their own Dataverse instance as an institutional repository. Similarly, the Alliance provides a National Federated Research Data Repository, or FRDR, as a generalist repository with capability to handle larger data sets. And both of these services are backed by strong development and support teams to assist researchers with curating and documenting data for deposit. So this collective approach, as I said, makes it possible for many institutions to support data curation and deposit at levels that may not be sustainable otherwise. As we move into data preservation, this is getting into some of our problem areas. So this was recognized as an area for development in Canada following the first survey in 2019. Borealis and FRDR do offer some preservation capabilities and thus can be an option for non-sensitive data. But while there has been progress in this area in recent years, a quarter of respondents still indicate that there are no options for data preservation available or promoted at their institutions. So definitely some room for growth here, and an area we'll be analyzing a bit more closely. We also asked respondents to characterize available infrastructure for storing sensitive data and Indigenous data. Both present challenges for the Canadian RDM community. Many respondents reference a lack of options for sensitive data storage once they outgrow the available institutional infrastructure. So in fact, almost 80% of respondents selected data sensitivity as a key barrier to supporting RDM. And several respondents expressed doubt that the options they do have available are sufficient amid growing concerns related to data security and sovereignty. And support for Indigenous data is even less common, with 40% of responding institutions indicating they do not have options available to enable principles of Indigenous data governance. And some early qualitative analysis of free text responses is showing that there's significant variation in approaches here. So some are relying on community-owned infrastructure and collaboration with Indigenous groups on a case-by-case basis. And so that's really as far as we've gotten so far with our analysis, at least in terms of what might be relevant to this session. We asked plenty of questions of institutions about their needs, barriers, planned investments, and potential accelerators to support RDM capacity. Some of the early themes that are coming out for us indicate, not surprisingly, that sustained funding is a key issue. Infrastructure and skills to support sensitive and Indigenous data management, training for data on anonymization, a few other things have come up to the top of the list as well so far. So we're continuing our more detailed analysis, and we'll share results at other events and conferences in the coming months, and we'll be publishing the detailed reports this fall, as I said. Based on what we're seeing so far, there's been significant strides in recent years, and the collective approach that Canada has been taking continues to be an area of strength to build on. So that's all I have. Thanks for being here, for your attention, and for hosting this session. We look forward to sharing more with the RDA community as we progress, and please feel welcome to reach out to any one of us if you'd like to continue the conversation or hear more about our results in the future.
Well, thanks, Tracy. That was really fantastic, and it really, I think, really touched on a lot of the other topics that we have. I'm thinking, Matt, would you be able to bring back that slide where you had those bullet points of questions, because I think it would be nice to try to tie it together a bit. You know the one I mean, where you had like the questions for the last section.
Yes, just one moment.
So yeah, so Tracy, I was really struck in your comments by it was not just coincidental, I guess, but how you really addressed. Because Ardari is always thinking about it from an institutional perspective. That's what we're trying to do. And I think many of your comments explicitly as well as implicitly address the issue of how DRAC can take the burden off of, in many ways, small institutions like yours, but also bigger institutions, and in fact is already doing so in areas like storage and Borealis and the various examples you gave. So my question is, how, looking, with your crystal ball, as DRAC develops more and starts to do more of the kind of service provision in a structured way, which it is doing, how do you see this relationship between the institutions and DRAC evolving?
I mean, I feel like it's evolving constantly. Some of the responses we're seeing, there's lots of really positive comments about that relationship. Um, there's also really positive comments. It's almost like the with our size and with the number of institutions and with the difference in size between some of them, the needs might be a little bit different. A lot of the initiatives that DRAC is running, sometimes like as a small institution, I'm participating in ways that I can, but we just can't take advantage of some of the larger ones. And so in some respects, I think it's some of the larger institutions paving the way and making things possible. But from a smaller institution, you can't necessarily be on the cutting edge of that. I think what we're seeing called for from some of the survey responses is more coordinated training. I think that is, we're seeing the response to the infrastructure needs, and that's building. There's still lots of work in progress there, but now it's about training people so that they can take advantage of it. And I would say I doubt there's any institutions in Canada that aren't facing the funding pressures that so many of us have talked about. And so that coordinated effort is becoming more and more important, but it may be more of a tiered approach, I think, perhaps, because the needs are very different. Like I am at an institution where just listening to Jonathan talk, that's like living the dream for us, right? Like I have trouble getting our senior leadership to pay any attention to this. And their, focus is just elsewhere with priorities and funding the way they are. So I don't know. Is that answering your question, Marie? Or
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
and anybody else from the team that's here, please feel free to jump in.
Yeah, I'll just add really quickly, Tracy. It's Elizabeth from DRAC. And also, some of the comments from the survey kind of relate more of a leadership role in terms of coordinating some of the hard-hitting issues like Indigenous data sovereignty as well as sensitive data. And developing either tools, policies, guidelines around those issues, since it's so varied. Every institution kind of approaches it differently, and there definitely is a gap or some need for support there. So definitely in terms of the relationship between the Alliance and institutions, yes, services, but also definitely some guidance and coordination there.
Okay, thank you. I think we have only 6 minutes left, and I think James, were you going to do a kind of summing up / observations on the session?
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, thanks everyone for contributing. So, one of the ideas of the Ardari Interest Group really is to learn from one another, to have these kind of conversations, see how other people are approaching shared problems, getting inspiration from each other. I mean, we do all represent organizations of quite different scales and so forth and face different challenges. But, I think sometimes we can, by having these discussions, still find commonalities, get ideas and so forth. So it's very gratifying to see that we started off, I think, with 17 participants, and we've finished this an hour and a half later with 17 participants. Just remains me really to say, if you have found any of the ideas or things discussed here interesting, do please join the interest group. Do contribute to the shared notes in the meeting. And if you've got any ideas for things that you might be interested in taking forward, whether it's picking up any of the things that we've discussed today and turning those into a potential working group, suggesting a birds of a feather, or indeed just topics for future meetings of the Ardari interest groups group, the kind of things that you would like to have conversations about, do kind of suggest them. And yeah, hopefully we can go on and continue to be useful. So yeah, does anybody have, before we do wrap up, any suggestions for future directions that we might be interested in working on collectively? Never very good. I'm not the world's best teacher because I know there's an art to leaving a silence there. But if any of you do have any ideas or suggestions, do please add them to the collaborative notes. Do we have another? Well, I think it's Matt. Do you want to drop another link into the collaborative notes just in case that
Yes, just did.
anyone wants to? Ah, brilliant, excellent, great. In which case, unless any of the other co-chairs have anything that they would like to add, I shall wrap this session up. And yeah, I hope that was good. Hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. And yeah, best wishes to you all. And let's hope we don't have to have too many instances where we do need to deal with cuts.